Hi everyone. Right now a lot of people are struggling with trying to figure out how to cook at home and what kind of things they should buy when they go to the grocery store because things are super expensive and we're trying to reduce grocery cost and figure out what they should eat. And so what this video is going to do is teach you the kind of things you should have on hand all the time to build super quick and easy meals, and also some things that are a little bit cheaper that maybe you might not be thinking of to just have in your house so that you can cook things that are less expensive. So what we're going to do to make this a little bit easier to think about is break these down into 6 different categories. So the first category is going to be essentials, and this is just because these are kind of the bulk items that are going to fill you up really well. Then we have canned items, and I don't really consider these to be cornerstone items just because we don't use them a whole lot in our house. Then you're going to have grains, and grains is very easily to describe because they're grains. Condiments and sauces are very highly customizable to exactly what your family knows and enjoys. Baking items are going to be things that you use in any of your baking recipes. So these are your basics like flour, sugar, and just keep in mind that for the purposes of this video, we are not including anything that is refrigerated. This is just things that are going to go into your pantry. But we are going to include produce because there are a couple produce items that do go into your pantry because they need to be stored in a cool, dry, and dark place. So let's get this started. So just in general, some hints for shopping that are kind of important. I'm going to put a list that's linked in the video description below, and this is going to be a Google Doc that you can click on. That's going to force you to make a copy of, and it's basically going to list out all these things that you can customize it to yourself. The other thing that's really nice is that you can keep an online shopping list in an app that for whatever grocery store you happen to use, so that you are able to keep track of what you run out of, and then just submit an order when you're ready. Some stores are going to charge more for items for online pickup, so it's always worth it to just run into the store and check and see if the prices in the app are the same as what you're paying in the stores, just to make sure that you're not spending more for a convenience than it's actually worth. So one of the biggest things that I like to do is during seasonal times like Christmas, I will bake a lot, but also I will stock up on any baking items because those items go on sale during that time of year. Look for trends of when things are on sale and stock up at that time, especially with pantry items. A lot of those times, those things will be good for a long period of time. Also, check for closeouts and items. Dry goods and cans can be used for a long time. So those closeout items a lot of times can save you a lot of money, and if it's something your family is going to use, then it's definitely worth checking that and getting those and using them. If you struggle with impulse buying, I mentioned earlier to use the apps as a grocery list, but to be careful that they charge more. But if you struggle with impulse buying and are going to go through and pick up 6 things of Christmas tree cakes like I will, then possibly using online pickup might be a better thing for you. Also, some hints for storage when you are getting things put away when you come home for the store. Any newly purchased items you want to put behind the items that you already have in your pantry. This is just so that you're using the older items first and that you are always making sure that you're keeping things fresh and that you don't have like a 6-year-old can of something sitting in the back. You want to seal any grains or snacks to prevent pests. Hard plastic or glass is going to be best just to make sure that you're not going to be drawing any bugs or mice or things like that. And you also want to store items in rows of like items to prevent buying what you already have on hand. It's really easy to lose track of what you have in your pantry already. So storing your items in rows is really helpful. I know for me, I will label the crap out of my pantry just to make sure that I have everything really, really well organized, because I don't want to have like 150 things of ketchup or 150 bags of chips, those types of things. So our first category is going to be essentials, and these are considered to be essentials because they are things that fill you up really well and they provide protein and stuff like that. So the hints for essentials are going to be customize this to what your family likes. If you are buying stuff your family doesn't enjoy, then there's no point. You're just going to have food sitting around and be wasted. You want to store these items sealed very well, since mice and bugs tend to like these a lot. And so make sure that you're sealing those up. Make sure your containers are things that have gaskets in them so that they are not going to get infiltrated. These also don't have a lot of flavor on their own, so they're versatile as sides or as parts of main dishes, but you always want to make sure that you're seasoning these really well. Keep a solid spice cabinet, use things like bouillon or stocks or things like that to add in some flavor, but it also means that you can change them up a whole lot and make them work for your family, and that you can customize them and eat them in a lot of different ways so they don't get old and played out over time. So your first essential item is going to be dried beans. And I know a lot of people don't care for dried beans, but I think a lot of y'all just have not had the right beans, first of all. But second of all, meat is getting more and more expensive. It has a lot of bad environmental impacts, and beans combined with other things can end up being a source of complete protein. Speaking of sources of complete protein, we have brown rice. If you add any sort of rice or any sort of grain with beans, you end up with a complete protein. And it is a great way to have added fiber. It helps your heart health. And so when you combine beans with rice, you end up with a meal that will fill you up. It helps with your heart. It's just a really good combination. Also, dried beans and rice are going to last until zombie apocalypse, and so it's a great thing to keep on hand just in general. Another thing that I always keep on hand, and it's going to sound crazy coming from somebody who has a culinary degree, but instant mashed potatoes are super, super versatile. They work okay as mashed potatoes if you're super, super tired. They can go on top of shepherd's pie. They can make a quick soup. They work as a thickener if you need to thicken something up really quickly. And the other essential that you definitely need to have are at least two types of pasta. You want a short type pasta like a penne or a cavatappi or macaroni noodles, and then you want a long pasta like spaghetti or angel hair just to have around to be able to make a pasta dish. Okay, so your next category is going to be canned food. And we don't use a ton of canned food in our house, but there are certain things that we always make sure that we have around. So the first thing we're going to start out with your canned food is some little general hints just to make sure that you are keeping these things the right amount of time. So canned food lasting for a while is a quality issue and not a food safety issue. Canned food, like a lot of your essentials that we talked about, is going to last through the zombie apocalypse, but it does lose quality over time. It's going to be tasting more and more bland. So the longer you keep it around, the worse it's going to taste. You also don't want to store cans in an area where they can get wet or damp because they are in metal, and so that can degrade the cans. So just make sure you're storing them somewhere that's dry. You don't want to purchase dented cans, but if you dent them yourself, just make sure that those are the ones that you use first. They're just fine to keep around for a little bit. A lot of people are very, very scared of dented cans, but if you saw it get dented, nothing's going to happen to it in a short period of time. So just use them first. It'll be fine. Now, if you ever hear a can hissing, or if you see a can that's bulging or something, you don't want to keep those around, but you'll be fine as long as you're using those dented cans. If you have high blood pressure, you do want to avoid most canned foods because they tend to be high in sodium. So if you have blood pressure that's salt sensitive, then avoid those. Can openers need to be cleaned after each use because you want to prevent foodborne illness and cross-contamination. A lot of people never clean their can openers. If mobility is not an issue, like you don't struggle with hand strength or anything, use a hand-operated can opener and not electric. If you struggle with can openers because your hands don't work well, then electric is just fine. But in those cases, try to get pop tops just because electric can openers just hold on to a lot of bacteria and things, and they're just almost impossible to clean. So with canned tomatoes, this is the first thing that we just always keep these on hand. And the form of canned tomatoes that you get doesn't really matter. You can get diced, you can get whole, whatever works for your family. We usually keep tomato sauce and diced and whole, but we don't buy spaghetti sauce because we can add our own seasonings into canned tomatoes. We don't buy tomato soup, but tomatoes in cans are a lot more versatile than buying individual tomato products. Also, tomato paste in a tube is my favorite thing ever because you never use a whole can of tomato paste, and with the tomato paste in a tube, you can just squeeze it out. Canned chicken is awesome for a lot of different purposes. It can be used for chicken salad, for pot pies, for pasta, like a chicken Alfredo. One of my favorite things to use it for is for buffalo chicken dip. For a lot of things that don't require chicken to be super flavorful or that you're just using it shredded, canned chicken works amazingly. If the recipe calls for boiled chicken, don't worry about boiling chicken, just buy canned chicken. And then tuna, same thing. It's great for tuna salad. It's great for a quick lunch. It's an excellent source of protein. And there's a whole lot of recipes online for using canned tuna, but it's just a great thing to have around just to, especially like for storms and things like that, because it doesn't require heating. You can just eat it straight out of the can, and it's a way to fill you up. Also, one of my favorite canned foods to keep in the house is chickpeas. They're great in salads. It's a great source of protein. It's the main ingredient of hummus. I never buy hummus. I always make my own. And a can of chickpeas is like 79 cents, and a thing of hummus is like $5. You'll save a lot of money that way. Your next category of things that you're going to look into is grains. And whole grains are wonderful because they have a whole lot of fiber in them, and that can help lower your cholesterol. So, biggest thing for grains is that you want to store them in hard plastic. Most grains come in some sort of paper or cardboard packaging, so get them stored in hard plastic. Tape the directions of the packaging to the outside of the container so that you know the ratios and directions of waters to grains. And if you need to know how to make any of these, check out our grains video on YouTube. I'll link it right here. So, favorite grains to cook. Oatmeal is super filling. Cream of wheat works amazingly. Grits are awesome. And then quinoa or couscous is a great option as well to keep in your pantry. So your next category is going to be condiments and sauces and things like that. So this category is going to be pretty customizable to whatever your family enjoys. These can be stored in the pantry before opening, but most of them are going to need to be stored in the fridge after you open them. So just keep that in mind. These are something you can stock up on. So look for sales on these, because the prices of these can add up over time. And unlike a lot of your other things we've talked about so far, the brands are very, very important to a lot of people. There is a taste difference in brands. Some people say there isn't. There's definitely a taste difference in certain brands of things. So the first thing that you want to keep in your pantry is peanut butter. Now, obviously, if you're allergic, or if anybody in your family is allergic, don't keep peanut butter in the house, because that's going to be an issue. But if you are not allergic to peanut butter, it's a wonderful source of protein. If you put it onto a sandwich, then that's a source of complete protein as well. And then obviously, if you're going to have peanut butter, you need to have some sort of jelly or jam. And that can also be something to add into sauces or things like that. And then you also want to have mayonnaise. That's something that's a good thing to have around. Now, in our household, we only allow Duke's mayonnaise. There are some other types of mayonnaise. I don't know what they are because they're wrong, but, to each their own. You also might want to have ketchup in your house. And ketchup is one of those things. We keep ours in the fridge. Some people don't. It's one of those things that is a contested thing. And then mustard is also something that you want to keep around. We usually keep a couple different types. We'll keep a yellow mustard and then a stone ground, and usually a Dijon, because they have some different flavor profiles when it comes to mustard. And then we always keep some sort of pickles. We'll keep a dill pickle, like a dill pickle chip, and we always keep some sort of sweet relish around for things like chicken salad and stuff. And I always keep olives around. I know a lot of people don't care for olives, but they are also really good to add into salads and things like that. So it's just something that we keep around at our house. And this is why this category is customizable. And then also hot sauce. And that's non-negotiable in a lot of households. And that's also one that most people have a preference on, and some people will keep multiple different types. So baking is another category of your essentials, or of your pantry staples that you'll have. And this is a category where you can end up with a lot of different issues when it comes to storage. So any of your dry products you want to store, once again, in those hard plastic or glass containers. because this is definitely something that can get infiltrated by pests. Mason jars with plastic lids are great for things like baking soda and salt, just because the containers for those just aren't good enough to last for a long period of time, and so those just work great for storing them long term. You can get the plastic lids in the canning sections of the stores. Label all of these products really well, because basically every single thing that you're going to use in baking is a white powder of some different type. And so if you don't label them, you can end up with some pretty strange results in your final products. So just make sure that you're labeling everything, and keep in mind that Sharpie does come off very easily. So typically you want to use an actual paper label or something that you stick on and write on, just because Sharpie will come off in a lot of cases. You want to store all of these in a cool, dry place, because all of these products are going to grab moisture from the air. They're going to grab moisture from wherever is around them. So just keep them away from any sources of water, just to prevent them from taking that in. Also, all of your flour, and this is really gross, but it comes with very tiny bugs in it. So to prevent those from growing over time, every bit of flour that we get in our house, we put in the freezer for at least 4 days. That kills them, and that way they don't grow in your containers. So if you've ever had those little tiny bugs, that prevents it. And then once you do that, let your frozen flour come to room temperature before putting it in your bins, because otherwise it will condense in your bins, and then that adds that moisture into the bins that we were talking about earlier, which makes you more susceptible to things like mold in the containers. So your first thing that you want to get for baking is going to be flour. And generally, this is something that's going to depend on how much baking you're going to do. So most of the time, for most households, all-purpose is just fine. If you are gluten-free, they make gluten-free substitutions that work amazing for a lot of different things. If you do a whole lot of baking, you might need bread and cake flour. Bread flour is going to work more for yeast breads and for things like pizza doughs. Cake flour is going to be more for softer things. The next thing you're going to need is just regular granulated white sugar. And any recipe that says sugar is going to be granulated sugar. That's just the standard sugar that you're going to use. And that's something you definitely want to keep sealed, because ants love it. Then you're going to want to have powdered sugar if you make a lot of icings and things like that. I generally keep that in the bags, though. I don't typically keep it in the canister, because a lot of recipes are going to cost for that in weight amounts. So unless you have a scale, you want to keep that in the bags. Brown sugar I don't buy in large amounts, because it just tends to dry out so quickly over time. And so I just buy that a little bit at a time, just as I need it. Your next category for baking is going to be leavening agents. And leavening agents are the things that make them rise. So baking powder is your first, and that contains an acid and a base, and when they combine, it's like the little volcanoes you made in elementary school when it makes lots of bubbles. So that acid and base does that. Baking soda is only the base, and so it needs an acid ingredient to react. So that's why you have things like buttermilk or lemon juice or things in the recipe to react with it. And then the other leavening agent is going to be the one that scares people the most, and that's going to be yeast. And if you are scared to work with yeast, we have got a ton of videos on our channel that will walk you through the process, and you can be making your own bread super quickly. It does have a specific set of conditions to work properly, so it can be finicky, but you can do it. Your next category is going to be the things that are going to flavor your food. So salt is going to be not only a flavoring, but it has some specific functions within your recipe, especially within yeast spreads. So don't just leave that out of your recipes. If you're salt sensitive, you might need to change the amounts, but just be careful with just pulling it out of recipes. You also want to have a good quality vanilla. If you're just starting out and money as an option, you can start out with something a little less expensive, just beginning, and then move your way up. But vanilla quality does make a difference. Cocoa powder is a great thing to have around. Some recipes are going to call for baking chocolate, but the substitutions using cocoa powder work just fine, so that's a great thing to have around. I also usually like to keep a dried fruit like cranberries or raisins around. I don't usually keep chocolate chips around. I buy those on an as-needed basis because the fat in those tends to make them go bad over time. The next category of things that we're going to be looking at is the fats that you want to keep on hand. You want to have some sort of neutral flavored cooking oil like canola, avocado, vegetable oil. I usually get canola oil. just because it's one of the less expensive ones and I go through a lot of oil with my baking business. But just some sort of neutral oil. Then having an olive oil on hand for cooking and things like that, that's super helpful to have. And then if you do a whole lot of baking, you may want to have some shortening around. And shortening is oil that has been solidified, it's been hydrogenated. This is not something you want to eat on a regular basis. It is not great for your health, but it's definitely something that will be helpful in making some icings. It's in some cookie recipes and stuff, so not a bad thing to have around. So the produce that you want to keep in your pantry, and we only have 2 specific things that are going to be stored in here. And so your hints for that is you're going to remove any of these from the plastic bag. That prevents them from going bad as quickly because air can get in and it's just not going to rot as quickly. The other thing that you're going to want to do is store your potatoes and onions in a dark place. I know we have all noticed potatoes and onions growing sprouts and getting those little spots on them. Storing them in a dark place is going to just extend out that process. The other thing you may have noticed is potatoes going kind of green over time, and that comes from them being in the daylight as well. So storing them in a dark place is just going to help them last a little bit longer. You want it to be a little cool as well. Potatoes and onions last for a good period of time, but when they go bad, they are some of the worst smelling things. If you are storing them in wood drawers, you want to store them in plastic or glass bins or bowls in case they go bad, because the last thing you want is them soaking into that wood surface, because you will not be able to get it out. For example, we have ours in a drawer, and so we keep ours in plastic bowls so that they don't end up leaking into the wood and making the drawer smell bad permanently. So potatoes are going to come in a lot of different varieties, and basically the different types are going to be indicated by the types of dish. So baking potatoes are going to be usually your russets. Red potatoes are going to be good for things like potato salad, so pay attention to that. Onions, kind of the same way. Your yellow onions are more for flavoring things. Your red onions end up being more decorative, and they have a different type of flavor, so that's something you want to think about as well. When you are storing these things, sometimes you can store them in paper bags, and that can help them last better as well. But pay attention to your recipes and what type of potato you want. Okay, this category is called provisions, and the reason that I call it this was kind of because it's a catch-all for things that I keep around for emergencies and last-minute snacks and desserts. Sometimes you might end up with a situation where you might need to make a really quick pie to take somewhere, or you might need you might run out of creamer or things like that. So that's what this category is. So I keep evaporated milk on hand. It can be a replacement for milk. It also works better in things like mac and cheese and things like that sometimes, and it replaces creamer if you run out of that, so it's just nice to have around. Condensed milk is used in a lot of recipes. It is basically evaporated milk that then has a whole lot of sugar added to it, so it's basically milk syrup, and that ends up making a lot of really quick desserts as well, so that's something that's really good to have around. I also keep some instant pudding and gelatin around. Even though I am a trained cook, one of my favorite things to make around the holidays is eggnog pie, and that has instant pudding in it. But it's just something that is super quick and easy, and it's just good to have around. And then I always keep popcorn at the house, and it's a really good snack. And I have an air popper, and if you make a lot of popcorn and you don't have an air popper, it's a lot easier to not spend money on the snack bags, and it's a lot better for the environment and all that good stuff. So get an air popper, it's better. Now, what are you going to use all this food for once you buy it? Let's talk about that. You can make spaghetti. So if you are making spaghetti, you're going to use your pasta, like you can use your spaghetti or your penne. Use your canned tomatoes to make a sauce with some onions, add in some garlic, add in some ground beef, add in sausage and spices or whatever else you need. You don't have to add any beef in, but that's a super easy meal that you can get out of these foods that you've already purchased. You can make a pasta salad out of the things that are in the pantry. So generally, the reason that I tell you to have a long and a short pasta, you can use your shorter pasta for the pasta salad. You can do a mayo base or an olive oil base. Add your spices in, maybe some vinegar, and add some cheese, diced ham, pepperonis, spices, seasonings, whatever you need. But it's super easy to pull something together for a last minute potluck or whatever. Couscous salad you can pull together almost completely from your pantry. So make couscous, and I've got a video on my YouTube channel that you can watch. Olive oil, raisins, you're going to make a vinaigrette, and chickpeas, and this is a complete protein, by the way. I will straight up eat this for girl dinner. No lie, like this stuff is so good. Add vinegar, lemon, spices. It is such a good dinner. It tastes amazing. It also comes together in the shortest amount of time, so this is a great one for a potluck as well. Chicken or tuna salad is a really great one to make out of this stuff as well. You've got your chicken or your tuna with some mayo, and then you can add in your relish that you've purchased. If you don't have relish, I have taken dill pickles and stuff and chopped those up and just added some sugar in, and believe me, it works just fine. And then added some onions and whatever seasoning. I love lemon pepper in both chicken and tuna salad. It really, really tastes amazing. You can make a really amazing tomato soup. I have a video about that on my YouTube channel as well, and you can actually add protein powder to tomato soup as well. A non-flavored type, but it works really well. But do canned tomatoes, evaporated milk, add some Parmesan, basil, garlic, and blend, and you have an amazing tomato soup. So breakfast is super easy from this stuff. You can make oatmeal, you can make cream of wheat, you can make grits. If you put sugar in your grits, I have thoughts. And then raisins go great in your oatmeal or your cream of wheat. The oatmeal is a great source of fiber as well. Other ideas from these things. With all the ingredients in here, you can make your own bread. And if you need ideas on how to do that, we have videos for that as well. You can use your own bread to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or chicken salad sandwiches, or tuna salad sandwiches. You can make red beans and rice, or any type of beans and rice. You can make potato soup with instant potatoes or real potatoes. You can make hummus using peanut butter in place of tahini, or you can use tahini if you have it. But hummus, when you buy it in the store, is super expensive, so this is a great replacement. I hope this video has given you some ideas of what you need to get in the store and made things a little less overwhelming. Thank you so much for joining us on Mixing with Mercs, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.